Hello everyone, and welcome to another video in which I'm going to explain why Bitcoin is the king of the cryptocurrency, why the altcoins are not so great, and why Grin is not just another altcoin. As always, create a new account on Bitmex, on Deribit, and or on crypto facilities with my referral link, which you can find below. That will save you 10 to 20% on transaction fees, and I'll get a tiny proportion of that for referring you. So yeah, let's start talking about the Bitcoin. So Bitcoin is a completely revolutionary technology which allows people to do trustless transactions in a decentralized manner. And why was Bitcoin so revolutionary? So in the past, the cypherpunks have created their their currencies, which were centralized, and every time there were some criminals using these currencies, and then some agencies were kicking out some doors and confiscating servers and closing these projects. Bitcoin is completely new. Now, a lot of people were trying to come up with something smarter than a centralized currency which can be closed. One of them was Peter Todd. You can find him on Twitter. He is a very smart guy, and he was trying to find something that would allow online transactions, but he failed. But Satoshi Nakamoto succeeded. He came up with this blockchain, and that allows decentralized, trustless transactions. Now, what makes Bitcoin Bitcoin? So there are transactions every 10 minutes. Well, there is a block every 10 minutes which contains transactions, and the block has 1 megabyte size limit. Now, Bitcoin is not the only cryptocurrency, but all the other cryptocurrencies are essentially copies of Bitcoin, which are not that revolutionary. They just have some features tweaked. And when you look at the top 10 crypto, these cryptocurrencies are essentially copies of Bitcoin with some small modifications. So the Bitcoin itself has been a major leap from the previous currencies like e-gold, which were all closed, and now it just cannot be closed. It's very decentralized. It's being mined mainly in China, but also in some Asian countries like Georgia. Then there is plenty of Bitcoin mining in Iceland, and then Northern America, where there's plenty of hydro. And you cannot just rock up to all these facilities and close Bitcoin and demand some transaction to be reversed. This is impossible, and this is the beauty of Bitcoin. Now, a lot of cryptocurrencies are claiming to be Bitcoin 2.0, to be faster, to be better, to do more transactions per second. But the 10-minute blocks and 1 megabyte block limit, these are features, these are not bugs, these are not limitations. 3 10-minute blocks in Bitcoin have the same security as 30 blocks in a cryptocurrency which has 1-minute blocks. And again, the block limit is not necessarily bad. It doesn't allow much spam on the blockchain, and it keeps a healthy market of fees, which Bitcoin will need when 21 million Bitcoins are created. So all these cryptos in the at the top of coin market cap, they are not so great. XRP is completely centralized. Ethereum is a world computer, but at the moment we cannot sort out Bitcoin, which is just a payment system. So before Bitcoin starts working properly, the world computer is not likely to have any utility or any use. EOS is completely centralized. Ethereum, I don't think it's going anywhere. Bitcoin Cash was an attempt to steal Bitcoin brand, mainly by some Chinese miners and Roger Ver. Litecoin was a genuine project, had fair distribution, and uses different hashing algorithm and 2.5-minute blocks. So I think if there is a problem with Bitcoin hashing algorithm, when there needs to be a hard fork, at that time you can use Litecoin instead. Before a hard fork is completed, it's a decent backup for Bitcoin, but it's not that different from Bitcoin. It's almost exactly the same. Tether is just US dollars. Tron, I don't know what that is. And an important one here is Monero, which is essentially Bitcoin with obfuscated transactions and with some ring signatures to slap on it, but nothing very revolutionary. And this is where Grin comes. Grin is completely revolutionary. It is built on top of Bitcoin technology, but it does have some really clever features which were completely unseen in the crypto space before. So yeah, going back to why Bitcoin is great. So Bitcoin is the best tech we have, and of the current cryptocurrencies, apart from Grin, none of them is really great. None of them is better. Certainly none of them is hands down better than Bitcoin. Like Monero is really good, gives good privacy at the trade-off being large transactions and large blockchain. So that takes us to Grin. Like, how is Grin different to Bitcoin? So let's talk about the history first. So the idea of Grin has been dropped by Tom. No, not by Tom. It has been by French. It has been dropped on a forum by French Lord Voldemort, and then he disappeared just like Satoshi Nakamoto. And since then there was a lot of development in Mimble Wimble technology, and Grin is an implementation of Mimble Wimble. Now how is it different to Bitcoin? So again, it utilizes blocks and proof of work, and proof of work, I believe, is the kind of mechanism to maintain blockchain. I don't think proof of stake is any good. So you have blocks every 1 minute in comparison to Bitcoin's 1 block every 10 minutes, and it uses some really clever cryptography to achieve very small blockchain and complete privacy. Like, well, not complete, but very good privacy much better in comparison to Monero privacy. So in Monero there are transactions, but they are obfuscated. You don't know where it came from, where it went, and what was the size of the transaction. In Grin, there are no discrete transactions. There is just one massive transaction. So one Grin block is a sum of inputs, sum of outputs, and you have no idea which input became which output. And this is an example of a Grin block. So 58 inputs, which are just pure inputs. It's not an address tied to, well, it's not a UTXO tied to an address. It's just the input, just the output. And these are the outputs. Again, no addresses, and then a few kernels which are secondary to all these complex hashing algorithms. So Bitcoin has 10-minute blocks, Grin has 1-minute blocks. The size of the block is about 1 megabyte on Bitcoin, and Bitcoin can do, I think, is it 3 transactions per second? Not too many, but Grin is allowed to do around 20 transactions per second. So Bitcoin can do on the main layer around 4 transactions per second. Yeah, it can do much more on Lightning Network, but on the base layer it can do around 4. So Grin is allowed much bigger transactions, and it has these 60-second blocks. So that's how you get 20 transactions per second, because at the moment this is the weight limit, and I believe the current limit is about 20 megabytes per block. These are really large blocks, much bigger than really anywhere in crypto. Like, you can have bigger ones on Bitcoin Cash, but nobody needs them, nobody uses them. This is arbitrary, this can go up. I believe this is now just being tested to see how the blocks propagate. Now, Bitcoin has been designed to have small blocks so that the blocks propagate really easily, that no entity has an advantage when a block travels throughout the globe. And 1 megabyte limit is a good one. Well, is a decent choice because it keeps the blockchain rather small. On Grin, there is some very clever cryptography which allows to remove a lot of transactions from the blockchain. So first of all, you have excellent privacy because you don't know which input goes into which output, and there are no addresses. But also you have very small blockchain, and this is thanks to the fact that some transactions can cancel each other. And this is Andrew Poelstra talking about how the transactions are being removed. So you can see that this white transaction, well, this is just some initial inputs. They generated the red output, and then the red output generated yellow and orange outputs here, and then both these outputs were completely spent into these green ones, and then the green, and then this green one has been completely spent. So Mimblewimble blockchain allows you to prune, to delete all these transactions from the blockchain so that you don't need them on the blockchain anymore. And this is how it works. So everything that has been spent will disappear. So all these are duplicates, and because this has been completely spent, there's no point in having it on the blockchain. The only important thing is that so if you have this pot of money being spent here, and it's being spent here, this is being spent here, you don't need to go through all these transactions. You don't need proof of these transactions on the blockchain. You only need the fact that this transaction has paid to this transaction, and all these can be removed. And this gives you a lot of blockchain size reduction. And if Mimblewimble has been created parallel to Bitcoin at the same time, the size of blockchain would have been 10 times smaller in comparison to Bitcoin if Mimblewimble had exact same amount of transactions. And this is even though the transactions are bigger and there is much more, cryptographic signatures, and these signatures are bigger because the cryptography is more complex on Mimblewimble in comparison to Bitcoin. Right. Another interesting thing that I think is that if there was Bitcoin and Mimblewimble launched at the same time, and if they had the same monetary policy, I think that Mimblewimble would have been the winner, and Bitcoin would have been a shitcoin, an inferior shitcoin to Mimblewimble, because it scales worse and because it doesn't have privacy. So these are the main features why Grin is different. Feature 1 is completely private, much more private than Monero, and feature 2, the blockchain is smaller. Now the problem with Grin is that the blocks are much bigger, so the signatures take much more space, so the size of a single block is bigger, and it propagates worse than a small Bitcoin block. The blocks are going every 1 minute, so problems with propagation are going to be magnified. Another thing is that to initiate a transaction, both parties need to be online, and that could be a bit of a bummer. But yeah, this is a feature. If you want to have such confidential transactions, you need to have a blinding factor, and both of you need to be online so that you do a handshake, some kind of exchange of signatures. Otherwise, it will not work. Another thing is emission of Grin. So Bitcoin has a very well-known emission curve. It's going to be close to 0 at 21 million Bitcoins, while the emission of Grin will be the same all the time. It will not decrease over time. So the block reward is 60 every minute. It has changed since this idea. So every second you'll get 1 Grin, and initially the inflation will be really high. It will be 400% in the first year, and it will just tailor down towards 30% after 3 years. Well, actually, yeah, the emission curve is the same no matter whether it's 50 or 60, and then you will get about 20% inflation every year after 5 years. So the emission will be much higher after several years on Grin in comparison to Bitcoin. Now, this makes it more difficult to get some sick gains, as it was the case with Bitcoin. But on the other hand, it creates an incentive for miners. Now, some people believe that there could be trouble if Bitcoin fees are low and there is no block reward, that miners will not be incentivized to secure the system. Now, I think that this is not the case and that the fees will remain high enough to secure the system, but it's not completely obvious that this will be the case, and Grin tackles this with decent tail emission. So over time the inflation will be dropping towards zero, but this will be like in around not within our lifetime, certainly. Okie dokie. Another thing is that Grin is very complex, so all this complex cryptography, it ensures that there are no negative balances and that no money is created out of thin air, but it creates more opportunities to generate some bugs in the system, so it will be much more complex. Also, there are no addresses, so developing wallets will be much more difficult, but not impossible. Also, with that inflation, it's being counterbalanced a little bit by fees being burned. So on Bitcoin the miner gets all the fees, while on Mimblewimble the fee is being burned, so nobody gets that fee. It disappears completely from the system. So that reduces the inflation just by a little bit. I have saved a few links. Yeah, so the launch of Mimblewimble was really fair, just as Bitcoin and Litecoin. Most of other cryptocurrencies were launched in an unfair manner, where there was a pre-mine. Now, no decent project will have a pre-mine, and I don't consider Ethereum decent. So yeah, Bitcoin and Litecoin had decent launches, and Grin has a decent launch. There is another cryptocurrency called Beam, which does have some benefits for the developers, but I believe the Grin will be the implementation which will shine, partially because the launch was fair and partially because it has a fantastic team of people working on it. These are the top brains of crypto. And if you listen to some people who have really good understanding of crypto, they will be talking to you about Grin, and they will be enthusiastic about Grin. So the main benefits of Mimblewimble are privacy and scalability. Now you can have plenty of stuff implemented on Mimblewimble, so you can have Lightning, you can have all these multisigs based on scriptless scripts, so you cannot do them the same as on Bitcoin, but you can do them in a different, slightly more complicated way. You can have channels, you can have atomic swaps, you can have Dandelion. I think Dandelion is already implemented and it just hides your location, so rather than broadcasting the transaction from where you are, which makes it possible for people snooping to locate where you are, where you're broadcasting from, Dandelion just does some hops and then your transaction is being broadcasted from somewhere else. Okay. So this is how a block looks like. This block had 58 inputs, 34 outputs, so that's about 20, maybe 30 transactions. At the moment nobody uses Grin, but that's understandable because it has just launched. Now Monero is a bit different. Nobody uses Monero as well, like not too many transactions really, but here the transactions are confidential, but the transactions exist, and at the moment I believe that Monero has not been broken, but potentially if someone sends enough transactions then they can read some stuff about what has been happening. So it has more potential to be broken than Mimblewimble. The transactions are being incentivized to have to spend a lot of inputs so that you can prune them, as here on Andrew Poelstra's video. And this is just a comparison how a transaction looks like on Bitcoin and on Mimblewimble. So on Bitcoin, Alice assigns a transaction to Bob with a fee, while on Mimblewimble, I think this is actually slightly incorrect, but Mimblewimble just says that there was an input from Alice, there was an output to Bob. These were in the same block, but it's not sure whether they were in the same transaction. They could have been, but they could be completely unrelated. Now Alice's balance has increased, Bob's balance, well, Alice's balance has decreased, Bob's has increased, but you don't know really by how much, because that's obfuscated. So yeah, everything is much more obfuscated on Mimblewimble. Now, how do I think you can make money on Grin? Now, it's not particularly easy, especially with such a huge inflation. You cannot short Grin at the moment yet. You might be able to do so on Bitfinex when it comes there, but at the moment there is very high inflation and the price has dropped a lot since the launch. So it has been around $5 now, but it has been much higher. It has been around $14 on major marketplaces. Another thing is that it's only being traded in some dodgy places. So this is dodgy with fake volume, I think, and Hotbit I think is fairly genuine, so you can trade it on Hotbit. But a lot of people who are interested in Grin, they are rather big ballers and they would never transfer money to Hotbit because they have rather large amounts. The volume here is rather low, and they don't trust Hotbit, which is fair enough. So I think that when Grin hits some major marketplaces, there will be a pump because a lot of people will want to own some Grin. But will it go up soon? Probably not much. So I would make a play by buying some at maybe $1 to $4 shortly before it's being implemented in major marketplaces, and then sell. And then probably wait for 2-3 years. And maybe after around 2-3 years, when there is about 100 million Grins, I would think about getting some only if the project is looking like it will be a massive success. Because if it is a massive success, it can have the same market cap as Bitcoin. And after these few years, with supply of 100 million, with the same market cap, you will have 100 million Grins, 20 million Bitcoins. So you will have, if the total market cap is the same, then one Grin will be a fifth of a Bitcoin. So if Bitcoin is 10k by then, Grin will be around 2k. So long term, if at some point it becomes obvious that Grin will be a massive success, I think it will be worth getting some, even though the emission curve is not as great as Bitcoin's emission curve. So it's not a get rich very quick like Bitcoin. It's probably get some decent privacy and decent transactions, but slowly get rich as well. And that's essentially it. So please leave some comments in the comment section. Comment, like, subscribe. As always, open a new account on Bitmex, on crypto facilities, and or on Deribit with my referral links, which you can find below. That will give you 10 to 20% discount on trading fees. And thank you very much for watching.